Welcome along, my aspiring allies, and thank you for joining me on this most recent episode of the Speaking of Inclusion podcast. This is the show where we get comfortable talking about some of those more taboo and often difficult topics, and we get confident to avoid the fear of putting our foot in it. And today, in fact, today and the next episode is going to be something a little bit different because we're doing a two-part special. And this is because I had a fantastic conversation with Andreena Leeane. Now, Andreena Leeane uses the pronouns she and her, and she is a lived experience speaker, a wellbeing workshop facilitator, a poet, and an author. And her job really revolves around helping corporates and large organizations with their inclusion and wellbeing strategies. And she delivers lunch and learn style sessions and talks all around topics of intersectionality, allyship, and generally emotional wellbeing and kindness in the workplace. However, when we had our talk, we got together in our first episode, which is the one that we're going to put out first. This is around employee resource groups. So this is what we really honed in on, because Andreena is an absolute expert when it comes to creating those spaces where employees and allies can come together and really help make a difference within the workplace. And we get into all of that. But what happened at the end of that conversation is that I had a message from Andreena, and she reached out to say that she'd had some reflections on the conversation that we had, and there were things that she wanted to add that she didn't say in the moment that she thought would be of value and of use for people. And I found this a really interesting reflection, because actually that happens a lot, doesn't it? Right? When we have conversations with people and a bit later on we think, oh God, I wish I'd have said this, or I wish I could have done that. And we don't often get the chance to have a do-over in those conversations. And I know ordinarily in podcasts, it's kind of a case of, well, it's said, it's done. And we also have to really recognize, especially for those of us that might be speakers or session facilitators ourselves, like we know so much, we can't possibly fit it all into one short conversation. But for me, when Andreena reached out, I thought, actually, this is a really good opportunity for us to role model one of those moments and maybe unpack some of the reflections that we have, especially as people who work in the inclusion space, because that's always happening, isn't it? There's always a reflection, or there's always a moment of like, oh, maybe that could be misinterpreted, because this is kind of how the world works. So I thought it would be a really good opportunity for us to have a second conversation. So rather than edit anything, because I don't do editing, have another conversation to really talk about what happens when we have these reflections and how might we handle that, how might we role model that. So it was kind of an experimental process that Andreena was really happy to get involved in. So I'm so pleased, A, that she had the reflection and shared it, and B, she was in agreement with me going, okay, well, let's give something new a try. So episode 1 that we're going to put out now is the employee resource group episode. So please enjoy that. Please do learn about creating those safe spaces for people from marginalised communities and allies to unite to really make strategic change happen. And then also watch this space, because next week we're going to release the part 2, which is our reflections on that and other conversations that we then went on to have. So without further ado, I really would love to introduce to you Andreena Leeane on the Speaking of Inclusion podcast as we get into employee resource groups.
Bright colours.
I'm not normally a bright colour wearer, to be honest. But yeah, today I was just feeling a bit of jazz, a bit of something.
Okay, I like that because our mood influences what we wear, isn't it?
Definitely. When I first got up, I put on a grey jumper and I was like, I'm not feeling grey today. I'm not feeling it. I was like, what have I got that's a bit more pop?
Yeah,
I think it's been inspired by the fact I do Wordle every day, and I got Wordle in 1 today. So I was like, right, well, that's my day sorted.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a good day.
Winning. Yeah, you started off winning. That's it.
It's funny, isn't it? The silly things that we do. That
Yeah.
Anyway, how are you feeling?
Yeah. I'm questioning whether I know my stuff enough to focus on one topic, but I should be okay. I should be all right.
Of course you do. I mean, maybe that's the thing, you know too much stuff about too many things. But if we go off on a tangent, that's all right.
Okay.
We'll go wherever the conversation
It's all
takes
part
us.
of it, isn't it? So.
Exactly. Yeah, it is all part of it. All of this conversation is all part of it. Like, it's all, we'll go wherever we go.
Yeah.
Talk about
Are
whatever.
we using the recording or just the audio or both?
I definitely using the audio. I'm in two minds now as to whether I want to start putting the video recordings on a YouTube channel, because I feel like I'm missing a trick not doing that.
Yeah, because
Would
it's
that be all right with you?
yeah, I'm happy with that. Because that's the thing, isn't it? Like you get different audiences in different places. If it's already done,
Yeah.
then
I feel like there's a work smarter, not harder thing going on in the background
yeah,
there.
yeah, go for it. I don't mind.
Oh, awesome. Well, thanks. Right. Coming to YouTube very soon then.
Yeah.
Cool. Okie dokie. So, employee networks, because this was something I was really kind of keen to talk to you about, because when some of our early conversations, you were talking about how you work with employee networks, and that's kind of one of your ideal areas of people that you like to talk to. And it really got me thinking that actually I don't do enough of my own kind of thinking around employee networks other than working with organizations to help create them and things like that. But actually I was like, well, I've never really got under the skin of the topic of employee networks in conversation with someone very deeply. So I thought this is the opportunity to be doing that.
Perfect.
So,
So
so
yeah.
let's begin at the beginning then. What's an employee network?
So an employee network, and a lot of organizations have one, and if they don't, they're catching on. Employee resource group networks, ERGs, they're basically a space where it's an employee-led group. Yeah, they're employee-led groups that basically create safe spaces for people with shared interests, same background, kind of like interest in advancing the company's culture for people with those marginalized identities.
Yeah.
Is and maybe not marginalized identities in terms of like employee resource groups. I can name probably like several different ones. Like you'd have the parents network, you'd have the LGBT network, often called the Proud Network, or
Mm,
you'd have the race and ethnicity network, you'd have the disability network, you'd have the youth engagement
yeah.
network,
Yeah.
the women's network. Like there's all of these networks, and they basically inform the organization's diversity and inclusion policies and initiatives, because it's where, you know, there's lots of organizations that have lots of people from all walks of life,
Mm,
and some people within the organizations are overlooked or discriminated against or marginalized or feel othered. And these groups, spaces are created to help people feel more welcome
yeah.
and to advance the strategy of the organization with inclusion. Because the thing is, like, what people need to know about these employee resource group networks is that one person can identify with various networks. For example,
Yeah.
yeah, so you might have heard of the term intersectionality, right? So intersectionality is the interconnected nature of a person's identity, right? It was a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, who's a law professor in America, a Black woman in America who coined the term in 1989, long time ago.
Ages
Yeah.
ago. Yeah.
But lots of people are talking about this intersectionality now. And to give you an idea of what this intersectionality looks like, I can give myself as an example. So in the workplace, I could potentially free up my time to belong to either the women's network, the LGBT network, the race and ethnicity network. They might have a mental health network.
Mhm.
They might have a parents network. That's
Yeah.
already like 4 or 5 networks that I've
Gonna keep you
already
busy.
mentioned
Yeah.
based on the intersections of my own identity.
Yeah.
And a lot of these employee networks, people don't get paid to do that work. And they often do the work outside of work hours
Mm,
as well. Like it's usually a group that meets up after work and stuff like that. And it's really important to recognize that, some people say I've got my day job and I've got my gay job, for example, like within
Yeah,
LGBT networks. And it's just really important to recognize that people could potentially belong to multiple marginalized groups. They can't obviously spread themselves so thin to
yeah,
do the work that's necessary in each of those groups, because they've got their own work to get on, their actual paid salaried position to do.
yeah,
So a lot of the people within these organizations who are part of the networks, they do it because they care.
yeah.
It's like not a passion project, but they do it because, yeah, they care.
They're
They care.
connected, right?
They're connected.
Yeah. Yeah, and
They're,
I mean, that makes total sense. And I can also understand why some people might then choose to say, well, yes, I identify, like, I could be in a number of these spaces, but for me, the most important one I'd like to be in is this one, and I just choose one.
yeah,
And that's why you might kind of, I'm trying to think, maybe sometimes if people are creating an employee resource group network, that they might be thinking, oh, well, we've got loads of people that would identify in this way. Why aren't they signing up? And it could be, well, they are, but maybe they're signing up in other places because they only have so much capacity and they're choosing to channel that quite
yeah.
intentionally.
Again, I can use myself as an example. I worked in the NHS for 21 years,
Mm,
and I chose to be part of the LGBT network because they didn't have many people of color in that network as well. Because
yeah,
there are quite a few Black LGBT people within organizations that choose not to come out at
yeah,
work. And
yeah.
I felt like I would contribute from a lived experience perspective as a Black woman, Black lesbian woman,
Yeah.
my not expertise, but my lived experience would
Mm.
be valuable as a different perspective
Totally.
within the LGBT group.
Yeah, it's very specific insight, isn't it? And
Yeah,
actually, to your point about intersectionality as well, like, yes, there's going to be multiple groups, but actually, you know, the representation within those groups is as equally important as having the separate groups. To your point, to say, well, okay, we can talk about the challenges that LGBTQI plus people might face, but that isn't separate to other
yeah,
issues that they might be facing, and it might not always be possible to have like good overlap between the groups, so having representation is really important.
exactly.
Yeah,
Because in the women's network, there's all types of women in the women's network.
right.
There's women from various marginalized groups. There's trans women. There's women. There's different types of everybody
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
organization, and it's not always represented within the groups, and some organizations don't feel the need to have some groups because
Mm.
they might not have people of that demographic in the workplace.
Yeah.
Do you
And
see? So I guess it
yeah.
depends on the needs of the organization.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say as well, the capacity of the organisation, because I can imagine places like the NHS, when you've got literally thousands of employees, you probably are more likely to be able to create separate groups that can really be
Yes.
quite specific in their objectives and their strategies. Whereas I can guess there might be some smaller organisations who maybe have, 100 people or 50 people, but they're still thinking, we'd love to have these conversations and we'd like to make sure we're doing something.
Yeah.
How would you recommend they approach that? Like, is there merit in having one group made up of lots of different demographics of people and being kind of holistic in representation?
Yeah, I think that is necessary. I don't think groups should be exclusive, because I think the the thing that I have noticed in doing this work is that there are lots of these subgroups, but then they're not collaborating with each other. They're
Mm,
not they're not joining forces on events. Not all of them, because there are some that join forces on events, and a lot of the ones that I work with, I tend to go in with the LGBT network and then we'll collaborate with the other networks, because I talk
mm,
about intersectionality. So it works really well. And but yeah, to answer your question, I think it's important I think it's important to have, if there's not enough people to represent a sub network, just have one network that has 5 people from various different backgrounds to all come together, and their main key focus is helping to create kind and inclusive workplaces where people feel like they belong and they can thrive at work.
Yeah.
If that's a common goal, then everyone's in that group is on the same page, regardless of where you're from. So that if you recognize any sort of injustice or inequality within the organization, you still got that space in which you could voice those concerns. Now, I think some people might think that's problematic because they want the separation, because they want those spaces to be able to like talk about the issue that they're having rather than trying to focus on other people's issues. But if we're focused on inclusion, then it should be everybody's business.
Yeah, I mean,
And
inclusion is everyone, right?
yeah, and if it means that a smaller organization might not need 5 or 6 or 7 different networks, what is the harm in having one network of people with the same goals and aspirations for the company to advance their policies? Because the thing is, I think when people talk about privilege, yeah, they tend to like think that only certain types of people have privilege, when actually, as a Black lesbian woman, I have loads of privilege that I recognize just by being a woman born in Britain, born in London, and I find that when I look outside of myself, of I use my privilege to see when something's not right for other people. Like, for example, I went to a hotel, yeah, and I was in the hotel reception and I went to use the toilet, and there was it was a accessible toilet, but there was 2 sinks, yeah. There was one sink that was really high up, and then there was one sink that was really low. The high sink had the hand dispenser, the hand wash, but the low sink didn't have any.
Huh.
Yeah. And it was attached. It was one of those, it wasn't a loose one that you buy in the supermarket. It was
Yeah.
attached to the wall that you have to refill. And so it was evident that the small sink just didn't have one installed. Yeah. And I'm 5'2", so I could use both, either of them, yeah,
Yeah.
of the sinks. But I thought to myself, imagine that, like the small sink didn't even have a hand wash. Like, okay, so they've thought about maybe people, wheelchair users or small children or whoever needs to wash their hands,
Yeah.
but they haven't thought of it fully
Yeah.
because there's no hand wash. And I thought that was so problematic, yeah. So instead of ignoring it, I just went to the receptionist person and I was like, oh, by the way, I've just used the toilet and I've noticed that the small sink didn't have the hand wash. Like, how bizarre. And then she said, she went and actually looked, and then she was like, oh, yeah. And then went and said that she'll report it to somebody. I don't know if she reported it because I haven't gone back and checked. But the thing is, that could have been none of my business. I could have just like washed my hands and left and gone about my business, not really giving a shit about
Yeah.
about the sink with
Yeah.
no hand wash. But I actually thought, no, actually, whose responsibility is it to look out for others? It's us. And if
Exactly.
we can see where things can benefit others, like, why not try and make that thing? But I think the problem is that a lot of people don't want to do the work. They don't want to do the work. They don't want to take that extra effort to think, oh yeah, I'm gonna go and tell someone that there's this and this and this, because actually that's gonna take another 5 minutes, and actually I'm gonna be late where I need to go. So
Mm.
let's just forget about it.
I mean, well, there's 2 steps, right, isn't there? Because there's firstly noticing it. Like
Yeah,
you've got you've got to be like open to seeing it first, and it's because I think because you are tuned in, aren't you, to your environment, and how, when I'm looking around, how does this environment work for everybody? You notice those things where
yeah,
clearly anybody else who's been in that toilet before you didn't, because no one else had said anything, including people that work there. So there's the seeing it, and then there's doing something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is so interesting. It's so interesting you say that, actually, because it reminded me when I was in an event recently, and in the accessible toilet, I noticed, well, in fact, no, I didn't notice. I was with someone who's using it, and they came out and said, "Have you got a mirror in the ladies?" So I went into the ladies. Yep, there's a mirror. She's like, "There isn't one in the accessible toilet," and I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, that's not on, really, is it? Because you're just installing things as standard." And they said, "Hang on a minute. So in the accessible toilet as well, have you got feminine hygiene products? Because they've got them, a basket of them for free in the ladies' loo." No,
Mm.
nothing in the accessible toilet. So it's like you've literally installed the basics. Admittedly, they had hand wash, which I would say is the absolute basic.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's things like that, isn't it? Like when you're putting things in, you think, oh yeah, we're going to do these nice things in these toilets. It's like, well, do them in
Yeah.
all the toilets.
But disabled people still have periods.
Exactly.
They still,
Exactly.
yeah, do you know what I mean? And but it's mind-boggling that people just don't think. And like the people who, it's really worrying actually, because the people that are installing and drawing up the plans and being paid big money to install all this stuff, like maybe they're the ones that need the diversity and inclusion training. But
Yeah.
then what about the people after them that they have to like agree the plans with? Like those people need to be like, okay, so you've done this, this, and this, but have you thought of this? Like, why is this not
Yeah.
a thing?
It gets all the
Like,
way down a chain, doesn't it? Of people going, what a good
yeah,
idea. Yes, that's a good idea. Sign
like
here. Yeah.
how did it? It's like even some there's some places that I go to. Like I didn't, to be honest with you, I did not realize, yeah, that London was just so like challenging for wheelchair users
Mm,
until my friend broke her foot, yes, and I had to push her around London. And I realized that a lot of the London stations are not accessible. I've realized the pavements are all dodgy and uneven. I've realized that people's overgrown hedge that goes over onto the
mm,
pavement is not like challenged, where people with visual impairment could actually hurt themselves,
yeah.
walking along the street. Like I've noticed like loads of little things since my friend's injury. And so I totally understand that some people, unless it affects them, they don't know, it just goes over their head. I get it because it took for
All
that
of
for
us,
me to
right?
notice.
Yeah. All
But
of us are in that space, aren't we? We don't know what we
yeah,
don't know.
but then once you do notice, what do you do about it?
Exactly.
That's the thing.
Mm,
What do you do? And I know that we can't do everything. I get that, but yeah, we all have our individual lives and all that. But it's the little things. And that's why these employee resource groups are really, really important because
mm,
they are, because they need that space. It's
yeah.
just that a lot of them are so under-resourced. Like the company, I work with a lot of corporate companies, and the company might have like a 12 grand budget to divide between 7 different networks. And 12 grand,
Yeah. What can you do?
yeah, it's okay for a smaller organization, but a lot of these big organizations are just like giving people the bare minimum.
Mm,
They're not even acknowledging that the amount of work and effort that they're. I know this sounds like general statements, like I'm just like bashing organizations, but employee resource groups need to be resourced properly, not just sort of like an expectation that
yeah.
if you're from a marginalized group that yeah, you are going to run the group and you are going to co-chair it, organize it, rally people up. You're going to do that as well as your day job
Mm.
and
Well,
not have no acknowledgement.
absolutely. And because for me, the thing that stands out as you say that is, yeah, we're going to ask a group of marginalized people within an
Yeah,
organization to work even harder to help us address the issues with the fact that they're marginalized in the first place. Like,
yeah.
and when you put it like that, it's kind of like, yeah, that doesn't sit well, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And the thing is, the people who are doing this work is because they really care about this stuff.
Mm,
They want to, but it's exhausting. It's really tiring. because sometimes it just seems like, all their efforts are just being wasted away, because people the people who are doing this additional labor, they're just like, well, I'm not being appreciated for it, this is not happening, that's not happening, so actually I'm not going to do it anymore.
Mm.
And then they might even leave the organization because they feel so disheartened that they're just not supported. And then somebody else comes up, or you normally find that the people who are really like, they're really, what's that word that I'm trying to look for? Like, they're the ones like rallying the troops, and they're doing the
Like really
work, and they're
engaged and motivated.
engaging.
Yeah.
Yeah, those ones. As soon as those people leave the organization, the employee network kind of just wanes a bit. Like, it
Right. So
loses
it's
its
got
oomph.
that central nut around a person rather than around a purpose.
Yeah, a lot of the time. And I know all of this is like anecdotal and general because I've been to a lot of places and stuff, but yeah,
Well, I mean, I would echo that as well, because that's also what I see in organizations around it is very, very, as you were saying, passionate, motivated, engaged people who are feeling a certain type of way about their workplace, and they can see how it can be better. And for me, I kind of see like the resource groups playing out in as like a twofold, and probably more, which you can share, like way of supporting people, in that it's good for the people as being part of the groups because they're creating community. So they're, like you say, they're getting that space where they can definitely be themselves, share their own experiences, and feel listened to, and then feel like something's going to come of it. It's not just like, I'm going to put all this out there and wait and see what happens. It's like, oh, and I can be part of creating something from sharing my own experiences. And like the real benefit of that, it is strategically really smart for organizations to do, because you're getting insight and feedback from a group of people who will tell you exactly what needs to be done to make people like them feel, think, belong better. Like,
exactly. And overall, it's good for the organization. People thrive and they do better and they want to stay long hours and they want to contribute more when they feel like they're being listened to, they're being supported, and all of that, that there is career progression and all of those things. There's lots of benefits to be part of a employee resource group, you know, but I think one of the things that I noticed, okay, a couple of months ago, I did a talk. I'm not going to say what organization it was, yeah.
yep.
And I speak about my lived experience, right? And you know, my lived experience, I talk about microaggressions, I talk about like lived experience stuff, things that I've been through in like 20 odd
Actual
years of
things that have happened to
employment.
you.
Yeah, 20 odd years of employment, but also like 42 years of life, yeah. Um, and so during the event, because I create welcoming spaces where people can share what they want to share. Anyway, there was a member of staff in their organization that shared their lived experience about a lot of things, which was welcomed. They shared a lot of things that people may not have known about the impact of things that they've been through. I'm trying to be very careful because I don't want to out the
Yeah,
situation yet.
yeah, don't, yeah.
And so he's there, talking as a white gay man about all his challenges and everything. Like, and I felt bad for him because I'm listening and everyone's listening, and these are his colleagues, and he's had a really terrible time in previous organizations where he wasn't out, and the treatment that he experienced when he was out and all of that. And he shared all of his lived experience. And honestly, like, most of us were all in, like, almost in tears over it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And imagine this, I'm the speaker that they've paid to come and speak about this stuff. And this guy's basically taken over the whole show. And everyone loved him. Everyone loved him and what he was talking about. And he really connected with people. And in the debrief session, because I always have a pre-event call, the session and the post-event debrief kind of thing, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And in the debrief session, like, we were talking about what went well, what went, what could have gone better, even better if, all of that stuff. And what they were saying, what they basically said is they realized within their organization that they didn't need to employ someone from outside to come and do a talk, because they had their very own lived experience speaker within the organization who shared and everyone connected with. And I was like, that is great that he did that emotional labor. Yeah. And I felt for his experiences. He really opened my eyes. But what you're failing to understand is that you pay people to go in and do this stuff and they go home.
Mm.
Now, he's offloaded all his stuff within
Oh,
the
bless him.
session, and he has to stay there. Like, his colleagues are going to see him in the staff room. You know,
Yeah.
I got to drive
And
home.
and who supports him afterwards, right? Because as
Exactly.
professional speakers, you're going to have a network of people where
Exactly.
you get this emotional support you need to be able to be that vulnerable.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I said to them. I said, it's all well and good that you've put him on this, like, star of the show kind of situation, but what support does he get afterwards?
Mm.
And how does he feel about saying such personal things to his colleagues? These are his colleagues. So now they see him in a different light because, yeah, maybe they've connected with him more because he's been vulnerable and all of that. But they were like, it's almost like a light bulb went off in their little heads, yeah, to say that we are going to use our employees
Mm.
to do that
Thank you.
work. We don't need speakers. We don't need to pay people. Let's just use what we have. We have our own resource that
Mm.
we're just gonna just
Yeah. And
use.
is
And
this
I felt like that was problematic, Katie. Yeah. The reason why I felt like that was problematic is because it's almost like every time Pride Month comes now, he is gonna be brought out like, this is
yeah.
our Pride champion for the organization. And they're just gonna like put him out there, and then when July comes and Pride Month's over, they're gonna just put him back in his box.
Yeah.
And like, actually, you cannot treat people like this. This is not okay.
I mean,
And
that's tokenism, right?
it was so bizarre that they thought that they did such a fantastic. They it's almost like they tapped into something so fantastic that they haven't actually thought through the consequences of the actions.
Yeah.
It's great that they create organizations and spaces where people can be vulnerable and share their experiences. That's what we want. But we also want to support people. We want people to be their authentic self. And it's great that, he's got an organization that, because he very much bigged up the organization about how well supported he is there and how much he loves working there and all of that stuff. So, you know, pat on the back for the organization for doing the right things. But then they go and say that in a debrief.
Mm. What's
So
really interesting that stands out for me though is like it's almost like they've started off with the thought process, haven't they, around, oh, we should listen to our people more, which
yeah,
let's face it is like inclusion 101, isn't it? Like
yeah,
hear what your people tell you, which is why I guess the employee networks are so valuable, because it's a way of connecting with and hearing what people have got to say to you, but in a very controlled environment where you can, people can be invited to participate and they can be held in safe spaces that have got boundaries and ground rules and ways of working associated to them so that everybody knows what happens in the space, what happens outside the space, and has a, because I can imagine he must have felt motivated to speak because you were speaking. So
yeah,
something in what you said connected into something that he felt
yeah.
that motivated him to be very vulnerable. And I wonder, he obviously hadn't shared that prior to that point. So what conditions were not present where he hadn't felt safe to share that with people previously? And to your point then, how are those conditions going to exist going forwards? And then the other thing that stood out as you were saying that was like, and that's all well and good that he's had a really positive experience at that organization. But in him doing that, if I'm sat next to him thinking, I'm also a white gay man, that is not my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Am I safe to speak up now? Because my experience is different to him and everybody's giving him the standing ovations and bringing him out every June for Pride. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
that's not me. So yeah, I'm with you in that it's a great start of a thought process, but have they really thought through
I don't think they have,
this
to be
process? So
honest.
that's interesting.
But you would think they have, because the debrief session is like a week after the event. I usually have it like within 2 weeks following the event, and this one was about a week later. So they did have a week to think about it, but
Mm,
they were just so like proud of themselves for recognizing that they've tapped into their own employee.
mm. I'm curious to ask you if they asked for your insight and input and advice as to what they could do with that.
No, they didn't ask for it. I gave it to them anyway.
Right, good.
I
Okay,
gave
but
it to
they
them
didn't
by
ask.
saying they didn't ask. They didn't ask. They said it and they were so proud of themselves. Um, I didn't feel offended either that they're basically saying, actually, we didn't need you. We didn't need to pay
Yeah.
you for your stuff. I didn't feel offended by that. When they said what they said, I was just like, but have you thought about, they didn't ask me my
Mm,
opinion, but I was like, well, have you thought about the impact that, him sharing his lived experience would have going forward in that way, and
yeah.
how potentially like I didn't give too much, because then that's a like I'm self-employed. That's a consultation.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
extra paid
yeah.
work. That's extra work. But I did say to them, like, fair enough, he did what he did, yeah, but I don't have to see him in the canteen.
Yeah,
I do my thing and I go home, and they have
yeah,
the conversation, and they've learned a lot in my session, and they implement what they need to implement, and
yeah.
no one got hurt. I'm
Exactly,
not saying
yeah.
he got hurt. Do you know what I mean? He never got,
But I guess the point is we don't know though.
yeah.
We don't know if he did get hurt or if he will be, feel hurt. And that's so interesting because actually at the crux of a lot of, the good work that comes out of inclusion, it is about sharing employee stories, isn't it? It is about sharing employee experience. That's kind of the point. We want to know what people feel.
Mm.
But yeah, exactly as you're saying, like in the right way, in a controlled way, in a strategic, considered way that everybody stays safe. Like, people feel safe to share things. Employers feel safe to have all these vulnerable people showing up and sharing all their experiences and not having to worry that it's going to become a story on, Twitter in next week or whatever, where they've been
Yeah.
exposed for doing something. Like there's a lot that can come out, isn't there, from just kind of saying, yeah, come on, everyone, tell us your story.
Yeah, and we're not discouraging people from sharing their lived experience. I think it's
Totally.
really helpful to hear, because a lot of what he shared was like really eye-opening for me as well, that he
Mm,
had experienced as a white gay man, like with,
yeah.
you'd think, yep, tons of privilege, like, and he experienced some really horrendous things,
Yeah.
even in his area, like, because he was talking about, him and his husband being the only gays in the village where they live and stuff. So they was talking, like, I know so much about this man's life, yeah, and so does his colleagues, which is not a bad thing. It's not
Yeah.
a bad thing. It's just, yeah,
Safety.
we want to create spaces where people can share and
Mm,
can have people can have empathy, kindness, and compassion towards each other. We want this. We do.
mm.
And yeah, but yeah, I don't think that should be instead of outsourcing people from outside coming in.
Yeah.
And I think that's the issue that I had a problem with.
Mm. Yeah,
You
because it's a complementary thing, right? Isn't it? Yes, you absolutely want the feedback. Like you need to understand your people. But when it comes to the really vulnerable, uh, deep stuff, like you say, having someone who can come in, share it safely, who also has experience of sharing it safely as well. It's not like I'm just going to get up and say this once and then I have to go away and have that vulnerability hangover that comes with literally bearing my soul to my entire organization. Like,
Yeah,
you are well prepared, well rehearsed, you know what you're going to say and when you're going to say it, and you know how much of yourself to give.
yeah,
And that's something that
exactly.
doesn't happen by accident. That will be something you've crafted and learned.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he was almost in tears and had the rest of us almost in tears, kind of thing, Whereas, like, a professional speaker is going to control their emotion in a way that they're not breaking down in front of their audience.
Mm. Yeah, kind of being able to tell the story, but with enough distance from some of the pain.
Yeah, exactly.
So
But
what
yeah,
kind of
that was
questions? So when
interesting.
it comes to employee networks, then what kind of questions do you think organizations should be asking of themselves? If they're kind of, if they're listening to this thinking, yeah, this is something we want to do because actually we want to make sure our people can share their stories and their own lived experiences, but we need to do it safely, and we need to know if we're gonna run an event where we can talk about this, we kind of don't know what to do. So how would you, I guess, where would you say people should start? What questions should they be asking of themselves?
I think organizations should dig deep into their pockets, their financial pockets. Yeah. Go there first, because that return on their investment is huge. Yeah. Pay people to come in with the expertise, whether it be lived experience or come in to analyze data within the organization or come in to do an assessment on things, or like pay external people rather than just relying on your internal people to do their work as well as extra work,
Mm.
um, with no incentive or bonuses or anything like that. Um, I would say, what can organizations do? Listen more, ask their members, their staff, ask them, like, how can we better support you? What can we do to help you? What would make your time here much better than it was last month, last week, last year? Like, what can we help you with?
Mm.
Because people don't want unreasonable stuff, you know. They just might want appreciation for the work that they're doing. They might just want acknowledgement to be seen and heard. They
Yeah.
might want they might want to receive a chair with better lumbar support for their back
Yeah.
within like 5 days rather than 5 weeks. They might want, do you know what I mean? Just the
Yeah.
basics.
Yeah.
Like, just think about the basics because people spend so much time at work. They do. And work is a place that's a lot of us are very connected with work. Work is a major part of our identities. And if we're in places where we don't feel like we belong or don't feel supported and all that, it's just a miserable thing to actually get up when the alarm goes off to actually go somewhere, travel there or online or wherever it is, whatever the case may be, to actually be there for hours and hours and then
Mm.
have to come home and then do it all again the next day and then be just waiting for the weekend. And now that they're kind of like waging a war on pubs and getting rid of pubs, we ain't even got the pub to go to anymore, as an outlet because they're turning them all to flats in London. Anyway, that's a London thing.
Come to the sticks. We've got
Um,
plenty of pubs for everyone.
yeah, but yeah, thinking about inclusion more holistically and more
Mm.
less less division and asking the employee resource groups like how they would want to be supported and what do they want, you know. 'Cause, yeah, we do things out of the kindness of our heart and stuff like that, but we want to be acknowledged.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
we
it's
live
when
in a
you
culture where we want a medal, an award. We want to go to an award ceremony and be, eating like tiny little food and dressing up.
Yeah, we
We
do.
want that and to be acknowledged that, this person has contributed this much and this is how it's benefited so many people.
Mm.
Yeah, we want that acknowledgement.
Organizations can do that, right? Because there are
Yeah,
they're giving awards away all over the place. So if your employee
yeah,
resource group is doing something special, you can get them some airtime. You can
yeah.
celebrate them. You can nominate them for things.
And
And
also maybe have things as well in place that if people don't feel like they can be part of an employee resource group, that there's another method of them interacting or engaging with the organization, rather than like saying, well, actually, you know, because some organizations, yeah, they have, like, say the Pride Network, for example, they might have, you know, people within the Pride Network who are very visible, and then they inspire other people to come out and be visible at work. But then there are some people that will be like, hell no, I am definitely not coming out at work. This is my private business. I'm not going to bring that side of me to work. And then they just, but then because they're not in the network,
Mm,
they're not included in the conversation. And I think it would be great to have means and ways of people still contributing without
mhm.
outing themselves if they want to
Mm.
contribute.
So that's interesting, actually, because I often have conversations around the role of allies within employee networks. And it'd be really interesting to hear your perspective on that. In fact, I will ask you first, what is your perspective on the role of allies in employee resource groups?
Yeah, I think allies are great as long as they're not there to just try and get some accolades or take over the group, you know. Like,
Yeah.
you know, there are people do things for different reasons, and there are some people who do things for unsavory reasons.
Mm,
And yeah, so some people might say they're an ally because, and they want to be part of that group because they want to be recognized as doing something within that group,
yeah,
and then it takes away from the people that are the people in that group. Allies can be very supportive when their thing is genuine, when
yeah, their intentions are coming from a really good place. yeah.
I think we need more allies. Like, you know, I was even talking to someone this morning about um I went to an event in London, and it was the first of its kind, and it was basically a Black organization talking about inequality and injustice and all of this stuff. And the majority of the audience, 90% of the audience was Black. Yeah, it was packed. It was a packed event. And the feedback that I gave is that you're talking to the people who already know the stuff. Like, you've missed an opportunity. Yeah, you need more white people in the room.
Hmm.
You need white people to hear about the struggles and that we face, they've they've never experienced it. They don't know about it. And if
Yep,
I'm here and I didn't learn nothing new, yeah. If
yep,
someone else, a white person, was in the room, then they would be able to, like, they might think, actually, I'm going to be an ally to these people because they've learned something
yeah,
that never was in their awareness before.
yeah,
So this group, this not outing their names, but they did a wonderful thing. It was a great day. It was like a conference basically, and it was very well organized, fantastic. But they missed it. They missed an opportunity because they had
mhm,
hundreds of people hearing about injustice and inequality and the reasons and what can be done to fix it, but the audience was wrong. You
yeah.
need
I
you
already know.
need people from all backgrounds, all walks of life to be able to recognize that this is an issue that affects people. And there's people are being disadvantaged because of their race, their disability, their whatever. And yeah, there could have been allies
Yeah,
formed out of that. People could have gone away from that whole day feeling really empowered and inspired to implement change
yeah,
within their environment, within their community, within, because remember, this stuff isn't just about workplace, it's about community as well, because these same
yeah.
people at work are the same people that shop in Tesco's, Sainsbury's, other supermarkets are mentioned
Yeah,
as well, Waitrose, wherever. Diversity and inclusion isn't just in the workplace, it's in our community,
exactly.
it's in our shared spaces, it's in our local coffee shop.
Yep.
We're around, well, I'm in London, so I'm around different people all the time. And that would have been a really good opportunity there. to reach a lot of people because they had so much information, so much data, so much this, that, and the other that would have been really interesting for people to hear, not the people that already know it. Not to
Yeah.
say that because I'm Black, I know everything about Black issues. I don't.
No.
But a lot of what was said didn't seem new to me because
Yeah.
I've lived a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, in my brain, I'm kind of seeing this metaphor of like it's like having a window with the curtains closed, and it's kind of like, well, you've already got the curtains open, so yes, you could probably open them a bit more, but you still have the view, right?
I
Whereas
love
I
that.
could come into that space, and I'm like, I've only opened the curtains yay wide.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna get the view, I've got to get those curtains open.
Wow, I love that,
That's what, as
Katie.
you well, that's you were saying. That's what I was seeing.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, I need, I need the view.
Yeah, definitely. And widening that view, that world view, that view out the window, the view of other people's experiences might spark something in you that says, well, actually, like, because all of this stuff, the change comes from each of us in as individuals doing a little bit to help someone else. So the same way I went and helped about the hand wash in the hotel toilet,
Yeah,
it, when it was nothing to do with me, it's the same way that someone else can do something else that implements change for somebody when it's got nothing to do with them. And it's a little thing that doesn't take much out of your life. You know, if we
yeah,
all had that kind of mindset, we would see change on a massive scale. And I'm not saying we haven't seen change because we have. We've come miles far in legislation, the 2010 Equalities Act. There's lots of atrocities that used to happen that don't anymore because of legislation and because of people's attitudes and different things. Um, but there's still so much more we can do.
yeah. Yeah, I think so. It's kind of like the rate of acceleration could be greater, couldn't it? Like
Yeah,
if we all did a bit, like the
yeah,
whatever that thing is, like the sum of the collective is greater than whatever something else. I don't know. There's a saying in there somewhere, but like if we all did a little bit, we'd get a lot further forward than relying on very few people to have to do more.
yeah. I think one of the big problems are though that in order to do a little bit, sometimes you have to give up something. You might
Mm.
have to give up a little bit of something that you have for others to have more. And some people might just want to hoard it all to themselves.
It's interesting you say that though, because you might have to. But actually, I tend to find what you have to give up is more giving up something of yourself rather than giving up something like a material possession. Because I've found that the discomfort of being in spaces that aren't designed with me at the center of it, which is unusual for me to find as a white woman, right? I fit in most places. But I actually now very much enjoy going to places that are not designed with me at the center, and I like feeling that slightly awkwardness of like, oh, what should I do for a minute, and then feeling welcomed, and then because actually, like what I give is I have to give of my time or my effort, but what I take is so much more valuable in the people I meet, the way that shapes my experiences, the worldview that I change, and and it makes me much more likely to show up in a better way for not only for more new people, but also for the people I already have in my life.
Yeah,
Like I show up better for everybody, which in turn makes my friends and people I already know show up better for me because they see something else and something new, and I can understand how some people might feel, oh yeah, maybe it does cost me something. Yeah, like maybe it does, but you get it back. You absolutely get it back. Even if you've got to buy a train ticket or an event ticket or you have to make a donation to someone, or like, maybe you don't accept that speaking gig and maybe you do recommend someone else because you actually do know in your heart of hearts they'd be better for it than you. Like, yeah, you maybe do have to give up a little bit.
right. We need to clone you, yeah, multiple times and put you in every single environment
Nah.
where there's a
No.
majority. That actually, because what you're saying is so spot on, because the benefits overall is beneficial. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I often
It is a
say about,
selfish act. Like being an ally is a selfish act.
yeah,
Like, but we can do it in a way that doesn't center, so it's not self-centered. Like, does that make sense? It's like,
yeah,
don't put yourself at the center because you're going to find yourself there anyway. Like, you know.
yeah, I hear that. It was really nice to hear you say that, because even though you didn't specify what environment you were in, like I've got a vivid imagination. So my mind kind of like put you at the center of a cookout in a Caribbean
Oh,
community.
love that.
And
I would love
yeah,
that.
my mind kind of just put you somewhere creative and nourishing and
Yeah.
fulfilling and all of that. And you kind of got to feel how it could potentially feel as I feel when I go to the theatre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but I think if I didn't go to the theatre, then it wouldn't shape me and my personality the way I don't know. Like I'm better off because I experience different cultures,
Yeah.
different things, different types of food, different movies, you know.
Yeah.
I watch Japanese movies with subtitles.
Me too.
And like I think it really improves my life, you know, it doesn't take anything away.
Yeah.
And it's just to try and explain that. But the way that you just articulated it was like, wow,
Oh, thank
like,
you.
yeah,
But I wholeheartedly believe it. Like, and I do recognize like it is shit scary to like walk it. So I, I've been to events that have been organised by Black-owned businesses for Black-owned businesses, and they've been real celebrations. And I know I stick out like a fucking sore thumb. And I wished I didn't actually, because we should all be championing the celebration of
yeah,
of everybody. Like everybody should have the opportunity to champion that. And I fully believe like those are things that should be celebrated. And I would like to
definitely.
be part of that celebration, but knowing like it's not about me and that's okay. And I think that sometimes is the thing, like it's not about me. Yeah, I feel massively uncomfortable and I should, quite frankly, and no, and that's no one else's business to manage my emotions. Like that's on me and my feelings in an environment. Like
In
that's
my experience, though, oh my gosh, we've gone from talking about employee
I
resource group
know,
networks to a
off we went.
whole nother thing. But in my experience as being a Black woman, yeah, I've noticed that my Black community welcome everybody. We're the most welcoming people. Like you come to our house or in our spaces, we want to offer you food. We might not have much, but
Yes.
we offer so much. We
I've
always,
never eaten so well, actually.
yeah, we try and like include everybody,
Yeah.
even though like we experience so much marginalization,
Yeah.
discrimination, racism, and all of that stuff. It hasn't stopped us from actually embracing everybody else.
Yeah.
So
100%.
like if you go to a Black event, predominantly Black event, people are going to welcome you with open arms. There
Totally.
might be a few like, oh, what's she doing here? But the majority of
That's
people are
fair enough,
actually quite
right?
welcoming. Yeah, but you know, the majority of people are actually quite welcoming.
Absolutely, I completely echo that because I have never been made to feel unwelcome. Again, those feelings are all on me. It's all my own apprehension. It's never been on the actions of anyone else towards me. It's all about me going, which says a lot about how uh because of being white and how I'm racialized. Like I'm used to being in a majority. Like it just is. So to not
Yeah,
feel that way, it really is the shoes on the other foot for a change. And I should feel that. Like I shouldn't be afraid to feel that. Um, because it's life, right? Like
yeah,
get over yourself. That's how I feel about it. But then, you know, I guess
But
it
some
easier
things
said
do
than done.
feel uncomfortable, but I think it's important to sit with that
Yeah, totally.
uncomfortability and feel that it's okay to talk about your feelings. Your feelings are valid wherever you come from.
Yeah,
And yeah, we could talk about this forever. Look
wicked.
at this. It's
I
been
know.
like nearly an hour. Just
I
look at the
know.
time.
I know.
Yeah, we've had such a good conversation.
We're happy
It's
to.
yeah,
I've really enjoyed
we
this.
went sideways.
We did go so, but
We were
this is
meant to
why I
talk
like.
about employee resource groups, but yeah, we still talked about that. We talked
We
about
did talk about
allyship.
that. We
Yeah,
did, yeah. And yeah, just to circle back on that, yeah. And this for that reason is why I totally believe we need allies in spaces, because actually, back to your point about recognizing privilege, I recognize there are spaces where my voice is heard, where other voices are not heard, and I want to be able to either use my voice productively if I've got the opportunity, or if not, to be able to use my voice to kind of send the attention to someone else who where it should be, like, and I can't do that if I don't know what's going on, like, or if I don't have an insight into things that are happening in the world or the way that other people are feeling right now. Because like you were saying, we don't know what we don't know. If I don't know that the hand soap can't be reached, I can't tell anyone that the hand soap can't be reached. So it's like,
yeah,
how do we broaden those horizons? So I firmly, but again, to your point, there's a question in there about like making sure that we check in with why are we showing up? Are we showing up because we've got FOMO that we weren't invited? Or are we showing up because we genuinely want to show up in service, you know, to
yeah.
be of use?
And we could talk for another hour about this
Yeah.
because I've got so many stories of where I've spoken to white people, yeah, who have gone above and beyond to help others and have been shunned by their own community. They've been
Yeah.
ostracized for putting their head above the parapet. They've been,
Yeah.
you know, they've been told, oh, why are you like this? You're not one of us, and yeah, it's really
Even that
worrying.
language is so divisive, isn't it? One of
Yeah,
us. Like, come on, like what,
it's
one of
really
the human race?
yeah, it's really worrying that
Yeah.
there are always going to be people who are either not engaged or don't care or too busy thinking about their own self or think actually we haven't got a problem, it's not a problem, nothing's a problem, they don't see it.
Well, it's
And
I
then
haven't got a problem, therefore nothing's a problem.
yeah, there's going to be those people, but I've met lots of people who are, you know, are quite selfless and quite, yeah, interested in research, even not just research as in like watching a YouTube video, because that's how I
Mhm.
do my research, but research around actually looking around them and asking who is missing from this space. And if things are being designed within the organization around people and those people are not even included in those
Yeah.
conversations, people are saying, well, actually, have you consulted these people that you're creating this thing for? You know, so we need voices from all people of all walks of life to contribute to these conversations for genuine reasons. And all of this activism stuff, if you want to call it activism, is there to benefit future generations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I could talk about loads of stuff because I've got a daughter who's 22 next week. And well, by the time this goes out, she's probably 22 already.
Yeah.
So I would like to know that I'm creating a better world for her as she gets older, and if her mindset is not pure, but if her mindset is of a kind and compassionate way, then she will spread that kindness and compassion within her circle, her friendship group, and then pass that on to her children when she
Yeah.
has them. And then there's change over time, a long,
Yeah.
long time, but it's change in the right direction.
Yeah. Agreed.
And if there's like it's not just me because there's loads of people who I've met that I'll even you sharing your stuff today, Katie, I'm like, wow, like you're on it. You're on it with
Well,
us on this
we're all making
movement, on
ripples,
this
right?
change.
We're all making ripples
Yeah, the
in the
ripples,
best way that
exactly.
we know how.
Exactly. And recognizing that we can't do everything and tackle every single injustice, but if we can do little things, that little things add
Yeah.
up a lot over time.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Andreena, thank you so much. I think this is we could continue. So I feel at some point we're going to have to stop. Otherwise, we're going to be here next week, and you'd have missed your daughter's birthday.
Yeah.
So, is there anything that you would like to say that you haven't been given an opportunity to say?
Um, check out my website, www.andreena.co.uk. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's going to be the
Um,
next question. Where can we find you? Where are the socials? How do
yeah,
we connect with you?
that's it really. Like, I feel like I've said as much as I've needed to say in this conversation because I don't revise what I'm gonna say. I kind of just I'm a living in the moment kind of person. I don't delve too much in the past or anything. I just live now, and a lot of how I communicate is like what comes out of my brain now kind of
Yeah,
thing.
brilliant.
Rather
Well,
than
that's
it
what we're
being
here for, right?
rehearsed, rather than it being rehearsed. And yeah, we've had such a brilliant conversation, and if there is anything to say another time, we can have another
We'll
one of
say it
these
then. We'll
conversations.
just we'll schedule these in, and we'll just
Yeah,
keep sharing
we'll
what's at the
just do it
forefront of our
again.
mind.
Yeah.
That's it. You'll see Andreena back soon then, I'm sure. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. So you've got your website, so www.andreena.co.uk.
Yes.
And I've got here in my notes as well that you're on Instagram. So at Andreena Leeane Speaker. So
Yeah. At
AND,
Andreena.leanne.speaker.
yeah. ANDREENA dot LEEANNE dot speaker, SPEAKER. So you're on Insta and you're on LinkedIn as well, aren't you?
Yeah, but I've just got a love-hate relationship with social media, so I try not to post anymore.
Fair
I'm
enough.
I'm
Okay.
over posting. I'm over it.
Oh, well, we're going to find out what you're doing next and we'll come and follow you, whatever trend you're starting then.
Yeah.
We'll send people to your website then where they can find out more about you and find out ways in which they can work with you. And for people that have heard, obviously you've already talked about the fact that you're a lived experience speaker. So people can come along, check you out and book you for any upcoming
Yeah.
events, can't they?
Exactly. And I also facilitate well-being workshops on self-care. So
We
there's
didn't
lots
even
of
talk about your well-being
no,
part.
we didn't, but we don't need to because life is
Excellent.
long. Life is long and every day is a new day to do something else and talk something else
Yes,
and interact and communicate. So just because we haven't said it doesn't mean it's gonna end. it's
that's
still
true.
it's still my
Eternity is
work.
a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Andreena
Take
Leeane,
care.
thank you so much for joining me today. It's been awesome to have you along.
Take care. Bye.